unlocking peak performance. You know, we live in a day when there are so many demands on people's time, and there are so many things going on in business that people that are busy, people that are stretched, if I can put it that way, have got so many things. How can they improve their performance? How can they become more productive? I'm just going to throw that open as a very loose question for you, just to get the thing started. And I don't know, we haven't prepared. Who's going to go first?
Well, I think, Alec, you should go, because you've got a great starting point.
Well, yes, I think that there's one key thing which I see from many clients, but also, you know, for many of those in the workplace. And I think the first thing is to look at what you're doing and actually think, how much of this is clutter? How much are you doing that maybe you don't need to do, or you're doing for the sake of doing it? So there's a whole thing around decluttering, and think, you know, looking at that bigger picture.
I'd like to take that actually one step further and say that, you know, and take it to the physicality of clutter. My husband would probably argue differently, but I do believe that for the majority of people, in order to have a clear view of what needs to be done, we actually need to clear the space that we're working in.
Okay, so decluttering is one, and actually having a clear space to work in is another, which I think is a nice development of that theme. So how does this then fit with this kind of modern concept of multitasking?
Oh. Don't like multitasking. It's multitasking for me creates a lot of stress, which is why a lot of people say, oh, I get a lot done. Because when we're under stress, we actually reduce hormones that do propel us forward. But multitasking creates a very, very stressful mental state, and that actually leads to massive overwhelm very quickly. So I would say try and focus on one thing at a time would be my top tip on that one.
Okay.
But I think there's an interesting point to add to that when we think about multitasking, particularly in the 2020s, because we've got one problem, this, and we've got email and everything else that's thrown at us. And sometimes it's interesting talking to some people. They say, well, I'm, you know, I quite like multitasking and I'm quite good at that. But actually, when you look at it objectively, where they're struggling with multitasking is constant interruptions. So you're trying to focus on something that you're working on, your brain's engaged in that, and then an email comes in, or there's a Facebook notification or a WhatsApp text. And this really impacts us, because the problem is our energy and our focus on what we were doing is stopped. Then we're looking at the email or WhatsApp, wherever it might be. And then how long does it take us to get back onto what we were doing and get that same train of thought? So I think it's really important to switch everything off, particularly when you're working on, you know, something really important, to keep that focus.
So you're talking there, I think, about aid to get you in the zone. I know for me, occasionally, I really find myself kind of really getting into my stride. All the distractions are somehow shut out. And so rather than kind of feeding our brains and feeding our eyes with distractions, it can be useful, is it then, to actually just push everything to one side and say, for the next hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, this is my focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've had to learn to do this. I'm not saying it was easy, but when I'm working on something now, I actually have to switch everything off that's around me. You know, like, for example, if I've got Outlook running, turn it off, or my phone's on silent, I turn it upside down, just so I don't get, you know, tempted, or you know, something comes in and then I'm thinking, oh, I'll just go and have a look at that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's really difficult to do when we're trying to engage in something that we're not altogether interested in. So if we're in the flow, it's very easy to keep the momentum going. But when we're not engaged, it's like, oh, I wonder, has so-and-so replied?
Right. So now hold on a minute. We've got an audience here who are probably there sitting. We've got 3 folks here who can't multitask. But the truth of it is, the reason I'm saying that is because my question then is, what are the benefits of what we've just said?
For me, the benefits are actually having focus on specific tasks. The other thing is right now, and I mean, it's true, if you take back, 30 years ago, you had to post a letter. You had to pick up the phone and make a call. And when your phone rang, you didn't know who was on the other end. It was amazing. It was like magical mystery tour. Today, we do have this expectation of, I've sent an email, it's been 30 seconds, why don't I have a reply? I think it's important to keep in mind that we do have the ability to say, well, I'm going to finish what I'm doing. It's going to take me half an hour. Let me get it done. If you can focus, you can not only be more efficient and more productive, but you're actually going to be a lot more, I think, calm and centered and present in what you're doing. So it will be easier to handle the stress.
Okay.
So I think that then lead on to procrastination.
Oh, can we do it later?
That's one thing. I think we see a lot of that. We procrastinate. Now, is it because we're just not motivated? What you were saying there, Tiffany, if we're not interested in what we're doing, we always try and put it off. We'll try and find something else to do. But actually, there's a couple of other things just to kind of, for the audience to think about. How much do they procrastinate, if at all? But is procrastination linked to perfectionism? That, they think, I've got to get this 100% right. And then that's putting a fear factor on, that's putting stress on. So actually, you could argue, do you then enjoy the task as much? Because you perfectionism, typically when we're trying to get something perfect, the question is, do we ever finish it? Because we go back to it and back to it and back to it. But then we could argue, what was the point? What would we have gained by making something 100% versus 98%? Was it worth that extra time?
So what you've both done there is you've offered two perspectives of procrastination. One is, am I really interested in this? And the other one is actually, I guess, in a way, kind of saying, I'm so interested in it that I'm going to make it perfect, but I'm not going to start until I can finish it and make it perfect. So a question for the audience, please pop this into the chat. How many of you, I'm going to use the word struggle with procrastination? Just pop that into the chat for us. We'll come back and take a look at that in a few seconds once you've had a chance to consider whether you want to answer that question and how you will answer it. Okay, we've got one from Tony Jane, absolutely. I will say I tend to fall into the camp of I don't like starting a job until I'm sure I can take it through to the end. That's me. I'm not sure that I would call it perfectionism because I don't know that I am a perfectionist. But there are some things though as well, Tiffany, I put off because, do I have to do this?
Absolutely. And then there's also that thing where we start the day and we all have our to-do lists. Yeah. And it's so easy to do the quick ones first, or the easy ones, or the ones that we like. Yeah. So we tend to leave the tasks that we don't want to do until further in the day, later in the day. We're tired. It doesn't get any easier. We spend the day stressing about the fact that we should have done them, that we haven't done them, that we need to do them. Yeah. And the stress is it just builds up. Right.
So this kind of neatly, and by the way, I do appreciate the comments. It does sound as though at least some of the audience are seeing procrastination as a challenge. But this kind of draws us into the topic of time management, because how do we manage time efficiently? We've all got the same 24 hours in the day. We've all got 7 days in the week, or 5 days if we're talking the working week, or however long it is. So we've all got the same amount of time available to us. What about time management? What can you say about that?
First thing I would say, but again, this leads on from the procrastination, and just maybe thinking about some of the comments that have come in. Sometimes, and you've kind of mentioned it as well, Nick, I've got a task to do, but maybe I'm not 100% sure on how it will end or every single step I need to do. And it does beg the question, when we are setting up a task, do we make this task too big? And what I mean by that, would it be easier to break a task down into smaller chunks? And we think, right, part 1 will be, part 2 will be, because then does that give us the flexibility to adapt what we were going to do once we actually start it? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's maybe just, again, just thinking of time management. But then the other thing is it then easier to think, well, okay, how long do we think it will take to do a couple of the, chunks of the task that I'm looking to do?
But is it important to know how long? Because what you're saying about breaking a task down makes so much sense. Because if I said to you, you know what, Nick, I want you to eat every single meal of your life today, you'd be like, that's mad. I can't do that. But that's what happens when we have a project. Is like we're looking at the whole thing and it's too much. Overwhelm comes in, and then we start getting into the planning of it. And I can see Robert's put there, not certain of the right way to carry out. So it's like we get bogged down in the details, where in fact, Alec, what you were saying is chunking it and then just simply taking the first step. It doesn't matter what that first step is.
I agree. I think that's a really well made point. The old analogy, how do you eat an elephant? Well, it's one bite at a time.
Exactly.
And that's how to do it. So time management's important. It's good for us to chunk our time so that, if we're working 8 hours a day, if we're working 6 hours, whether we're doing 5 days, 7 days a week, let's allocate time to the things that are necessary, and don't just let the time fritter itself away with checking LinkedIn or filtering through emails at a stage when really we could be focusing on something that's really key.
And I think what's really important is people tend to do to-do lists, and they have to-do lists for the day or the week, and they go through them and they tick things off, and there's inevitably things which are left on there. So they put them again for the next week. And the same things are there. If they're consistently there, it's a good indication that they don't actually need to be done. So maybe just take them off your list. Sorry, Nick, carry on.
Carry on. I cut across you.
No, I was going to say what I suggest with my clients is that when they have the list of things that they need to do, color code it to start off with. Super important, kind of important, and let's see what happens. And you put it into the list of priorities, and you work your way through it.
Yeah.
That's the Eisenhower matrix then.
Okay, so that's the differentiation between what's urgent and what's important, or what's both urgent and important, eh?
But so this is just for those that don't know. So you've got the Eisenhower matrix. Stephen Covey discusses this in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it has 4 boxes. So you put tasks into urgent and important. You put them into important, not urgent, urgent, not important, and not urgent and not important. And what we typically see is that we put a lot of stuff into urgent and important. And that's suggested, these are tasks with deadlines or consequences. And that typically gives us more stress. That can add to procrastination. That can impact our focus.
Yeah.
However, if we were thinking ahead and thinking, right, well, how do we get smart on time? Are we looking ahead and thinking maybe bigger picture, and maybe thinking about, well, what tasks are we not sure of the deadlines, but if we started to do them now, it would actually give us long-term success. I think a great example of that is health. When we think about, well, we need to lose weight, or we want to get more fit, is that urgent and important? Because then that's a stress factor. But if it's important and not urgent, it's a longer term plan that you might think, well, the next couple of months, I'm going to go 4 or 5 mile walking every 3 times a week or something. But you're building up slowly. And typically what we see is people feel they've got more control as a result, because they're thinking that longer term, but it's not a stress. It's not, I've got to do it by tomorrow. It's longer term.
Right. So it's not about us just being reactive every day, day by day. It's about us actually starting to plan how we're going to spend our time and what things we're going to spend our time on. importantly, you know, it's going to be those bigger, more important, longer term things that will actually kind of act as, I don't know what we'd call them, pillars or rocks that we're going to see as unmovable in the calendar. I just want to acknowledge that we've got a question that's come in from Craig, which I think actually now might be a good time for us to take a look at it. It should be popping up on the screen now. So Craig's in a very good habit, just like you, Alec. He turns his phone over, but he's got a however. He's got a high maintenance client who wants him on a call. What are our thoughts about how we could deal with this?
Oh, I'd like Craig, I'd love to jump in on this one. And I would say that you might need to establish some boundaries with this high maintenance client of yours and just explain that, you know, you are on call. However, there could be certain instances where you might take X, whatever it is that seems reasonable to you, be it half an hour, 1 hour to reply, and just start setting some small boundaries to manage his expectations around your availability.
Do you think it's reasonable that Craig could actually even give a kind of a 3-tier system to the client, you know, because not everything is urgent. It might be that for their convenience, they want an answer now, but not everything's super urgent. So if the client could use the phone for when it's super urgent and maybe use a message when a bit more time's available or something like that, what do you think? Is that a daft idea? Would that help with kind of setting boundaries?
It could take over, because, for example, if the client is high maintenance and needy, and you say to them, well, use the phone if it's super urgent, then poor old Craig is going to get phone calls every 5 minutes.
Well, he's already getting the phone calls. That's what I was thinking. You see,
I thought they were messages. Sorry.
I don't know. I'm going to go back to that question actually now. I'm going to go put it back up there.
Who wants me on call? Craig. I don't know if Craig could just clarify. Is it messages or is he calling you on the phone? You pop the answer in the chat. Because
that would be great. Sorry, Craig, I think I've made a bit of a meal of this one. Hopefully it's not going to distract.
I would set the boundaries to whatever it is that is okay with me, because it's for Craig to set the boundaries in accordance.
Exactly. So I was just thinking about offering options to the client that, you know, not everything can be super urgent.
Yeah, but high maintenance clients can also not understand the difference between a high, you know, urgent and not.
Yeah. Okay. So it might just be a heart-to-heart conversation, Craig, just to say, if it's in a message, I'll deal with it in this length of time. If it's a call, I'll speak to you, or something along those lines.
Yeah, if I can. Also.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to move on. I think you already touched on something, Alec, about healthy work habits, in the sense that we can get sucked into work. You know, for most of us, work's very important, and we know that work will just keep taking as long as we're prepared to give. What are some of the healthy habits that we can kind of put in place? You know, Tiffany mentioned boundaries and stuff. So what can we do there?
Do you know, it's an interesting one, and this has come up in the news, particularly over the past year, since we've moved much more to remote and hybrid working, because it is suggested we're getting more unfit, we're putting the weight on, because when we're working remotely, we're typically on our screens the whole day. We don't move. And there's a discussion, and some companies are now saying, look, even if you're working remotely, you've got to take time off. You've maybe an hour, or you've got to have, as well as that hour, you've got to have short breaks during the day as well. And I think if you think about time management, and you know, I was like this. If I don't have a regular break, if I don't go for a walk and recharge, thinking back to everything we've discussed earlier, everything is more of an issue. I.e., I'm doing a task. This is too much. Oh, when am I going to get it done? And then you start to procrastinate. Your productivity drops, your focus drops, your creativity, you know, is impacted as well. And I think we are starting to see this is becoming more of an issue, and how much hybrid and remote working is contributing more to that. I think we've got to learn new habits, and we've got to think, right, 12 o'clock, 12:30, I'm stopping for an hour. You know, sometimes because you work from home, it's easy. Oh, I'll just work tonight. I'll do an extra hour in wherever I work, the kitchen or the bedroom or wherever it might be. And I think we need to have a bit more control over this, because, you know, we're starting to see, and I've spoken to some people, it's swallowing them up. They're just, oh, I'm working 15 hours a day from home. But actually, they're achieving less, and it's impacting their health longer term.
Yeah. But it's funny because I have clients like, I don't have time for lunch. And I say, well, you don't have time? Why? Well, my schedule's booked up. And I said, booked up with what? With meetings. I said, so if it's in your agenda as a meeting, you'll have it. Yes. I said, we'll put lunch in as a meeting. So you put your lunch in as a meeting. In your schedule, you put your walk. You go for an hour's walk or whatever. And then you set a time, like a fixed time where you start and you finish. So I start at 9 or at 10. I'm not great in the morning, so I don't do ask Alec, can we meet at 8? No. My brain starts at 10. Sorry. If you want to meet at 7 in the evening, I'm good for that. I can do that. But it's like you have your start and your finish times, and you stick to that, and you put those times for you in your agenda. That would be my top tip for that one.
Oh, can I just, Tiffany's reminded me of something there. And this is a question, I think, for everyone, because this is about prime time. Because when we talk about how we manage our time, actually, part of that is that self-awareness to think, when is my prime time? I.e., when am I the best during the day? I'm a morning person, right? I'm at my desk at 6:30 in the morning, because I'm much better working in the morning, and in the afternoon, I'm not that good. Whereas Tiffany, I think, is a little bit opposite. Hence why I say, can we get a call first thing? But I actually manage my day and think, right, for certain tasks, I do that in the morning because they're a bit more complex. I need a bit more brain thought behind them. And I try and do the easier tasks in the afternoon. So it's a question for everyone. When is your prime time?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. I think understanding ourselves is really, really important. And just as you were both talking there, I was thinking a lot of what we've talked about today has actually been about being purposeful in our approach to things, not just being random, relaxed, even leisurely. It's about being thoughtful and planned. So with that in mind, we should become more productive. We should be able to raise our performance just by nudging things along. What part, and I'm conscious that we've only got 2 or 3 minutes left, what part does continued learning and skills development play in productivity and performance?
Well, I think if you want to become more aware and more purposeful, then just investing in yourself is hugely important. And one thing that came up when you was talking, Alec, just earlier on, is the importance of being aware of the choices that we make on a daily basis. It's the small choices that we make. For example, I need to move. You don't need to do an hour, do 10 minutes. Don't have the chocolate bar, have a salad. It's those small choices. If you can make the right choices and make them consistently, you will find that it will pay off massively in the long term.
Yeah. Alec, anything from you on this?
Yeah, just a quick point, because I know about time. This is the battle, right? Because if we're very busy at the minute, how much of us are actually getting to spend time on L&D? Because we just think, oh no, it's not a priority. I've got more important things to do. But, and it maybe links back to something we talked about earlier, and I think it was linked to procrastination and, do we have the knowledge to do a task? And for me, I think if we build, I don't know, even 2 to 3 hours a week of L&D time, in the longer term, how much is that helping us? Number one, stay ahead of the competition because of all the changes in technology, but actually helping us think, right, because I'm learning more and more and more, when I'm doing tasks, I'm becoming more efficient. Actually, I've got new knowledge I can apply and I'm getting a better job done. That helps perfectionism, it helps try to deal with a big task. So it has so many benefits, but we've got to build that time in every week to do L&D. And it's hard.
just to come back, building the time is very easy. For example, you want to read a book that is going to improve you in some way, read 10 pages a day. It's the small choices that you make. 10 pages a day.
Yeah, good one. Good one. Okay, so we've got a minute to go. I want to know from each of you what your hack is that you're going to share. We've shared quite a lot in just a short time, and I appreciate this is a bit of a gallop to do all of this in 30 minutes. Maybe our webinar should be a bit longer. But what would be the hack that you would recommend, one each?
Okay, my hack would be make sure that your first action in the morning is not to hit the snooze button. Don't make your first action one of procrastination, because it does set you up for the rest of the day.
Cool. Thank you, Tiffany. Alec?
I would recommend and suggest, if it's to 20-30 minutes a day, me time. Part of work, me time. That gives you self-reflection, because there's one other thing very quickly. We forget to have me time in our days typically. And if we had that 20-30 minutes reflection every day, think about yesterday, think about today, tomorrow. What do we benefit from that? Back to decluttering. Helps to declutter.
Very good. Very good. And I'm going to add one, and that is, do be sure that you sharpen the saw. You cannot successfully cut down a tree with a blunt saw, so you do have to recharge your batteries. But the way we each recharge our batteries is different. For some people, it's being with other people. For other people, it's being by themselves, reading a book, going out for a walk. Whatever it is for you, do it. Sharpen the saw. Okay, I'm going to draw our session to a close. It is a pity we've only got 30 minutes, but I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope everybody in the audience has enjoyed it too. We can get kind of wrapped up in our conversation between each other, can't we? So, but yeah, I hope it's been valuable, and yeah, I hope that you are able to take something away from it. So thank you, Alec. Thank you, Tiffany, for joining me today, and thank you to everybody in the audience for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, Alec, and thank you everybody for joining us. It was brilliant.
Yes, likewise.